Card Nation, what is going on, everyone? Welcome into this week's episode of Around the ACC with DP, part of the Cardinal Sports Zone podcast network. As always, I'm your host, Dalton Pence, hence the DP in the name of the show. And I want to thank you all again for tuning in. Thanks to all of those that tune in weekly, all of the subscribers, all of the sponsors that make not only this show, but the original Cardinal Sports Zone podcast and Live with 55 even possible for the fans. Louisville coming off of a huge come-from-behind victory against Boston College this past weekend on Friday night up in Chestnut Hill. Louisville facing deficits of 20 in the first half and 17 in the second half with about 8 minutes to go in the third quarter. And then they rose to the occasion and ended up victorious. Louisville now 5-3 overall. They are, 3-2 in conference play with a chance to secure bowl eligibility against Clemson, although it's probably it's an uphill battle. Let's call it how it is. But a lot of people are wondering, how good are the Clemson Tigers? Truthfully, for me, I think that this is the toughest game of the season. And it's been that way for quite some time. Even before Louisville played Miami, this was the toughest game to me. I even ranked the toughest games on the schedule in an episode of Locked on Louisville, daily Monday through Friday show, 30-minute episodes covering the Louisville Cardinals, show that I host. I said that the Miami game was the second most challenging game of the season, only trailing the Clemson game. And there's three reasons that when they combine, it pretty much tells the tale. This is the toughest game that Louisville will play all season long. And it starts with my viewpoint of the Clemson Tigers. I personally have been for quite some time thinking that Clemson is the best team in the conference. If you played a game between Clemson and Miami right now on a neutral field, who do I think would win? I think it's Clemson. I do. And people want to talk about, well, Clemson really hasn't played anybody since losing to Georgia. Well, Miami really hasn't either. I mean, they almost lost to Virginia Tech, almost lost to California, 7-point win against Louisville. They've got blowout victories over Florida, who struggled at the beginning of the year, a decent win though. Florida A&M, Ball State, South Florida, who is currently 3-4, and Florida State, who is on an all-time historical skid, which we are so happy to see. But again, if you talk about Clemson's strength of schedule through the first 7 games of the year, I think it's only right to apply that same logic to Miami, right? I mean, what have you seen from Miami outside of electric offense? Now, again, I'm not taking credit away from them because all you can do is win games. At the end of the day, you handle the teams in front of you, and that's a wrap. And both teams, for the most part, have done that. The only time Clemson didn't was the opening game of the season. But since then, they've been a buzzsaw for teams to play against. And Miami has won, albeit some of these games have been close, but at the end of the day, they still have won. And there's a level of recognition and praise that go into winning games. Sort of like how Louisville did last year in 2023. They barely beat Georgia Tech. They barely beat Indiana, NC State, Virginia, Miami, but guess what? They won those games. So at the end of the day, that's all that mattered. Yeah, style points do have some weight tied to them with significance, but the majority of significance is tied to winning games. And Louisville did that. Clemson's doing that now. Miami has done that all season. But I think it's funny to me when people say, well, Clemson's, they're not as good as we think because they really haven't played anybody. And I'm thinking to myself, are you sure about that? Because I mean, I'm sitting here and I'm like, it's sort of It's sort of apples to apples here. You're seeing a lot of the same, you know, you're seeing a lot of the same similarities when it comes to scheduling. Now, the ACC has been sort of up and down, but up until this point, neither Clemson nor Miami has played SMU, nor have they played Pittsburgh. Miami has played Louisville, which I would venture into saying that Louisville is the best team that in the ACC that either of them have played up until this point. I don't think that that's far fetched. But again, this is more so geared towards the conversation that, well, Clemson hasn't played anybody, but yeah, Miami also hasn't as well. And yes, you have to talk about Cam Ward. Cam Ward is a Heisman hopeful. He is the best quarterback in the country this year, in my opinion. But Cade Klubnik hasn't been bad. Ever since that opening game, he's growing in confidence. The young receiver core that they have has been really good. Jake Brenningstold, the tight end, has been great. Offensive line has kept Klubnik upright. Not to mention you have Phil Maffa, one of the top 3 to 5 running backs in the ACC overall. So personally for me, I think Clemson is the best team in the conference. And their wins, all 5 or all 6 of them have been blowouts. Like, yeah, you can only play who's in front of you on your schedule, but they beat NC State by 24. They beat Stanford by 26. They beat Florida State by 16. They beat Wake Forest by 35. Virginia by 17. They're not really close games that they're playing. So I think that when you look at this from that standpoint, comparing both schedules, it's hard to really differentiate based upon that. It's all about the eye test. I believe in Clemson's defense more than I do Miami's defense. Some people want to say that Clemson's defense is really basic. Considering who their offensive coordinator is, I don't really know that to be true. Garrett Riley is a really bright offensive mind. It's not basic to what I've watched. So for me, the reason number one why this is the toughest game for Louisville is because they're playing the best team in the ACC. Now let's factor in the devil's advocate. Let's say if Miami were to be the top team in the ACC. Let's just say that. At that point, second reason, Miami game was at home. Clemson game's on the road, and to make matters worse, it's on the road at night in a hostile environment. That's not an easy place to play. Not an easy place to play whatsoever. It's hard playing there during the day. It's even more challenging to go there and play and try to win at night. So the second reason as to why this is the toughest game for the Louisville Cardinals is because it is on the road at night, and it is probably the one place that Louisville will play this year to where it is an intimidating road game. Now, maybe Notre Dame, you can say Notre Dame, but it's not comparable to Memorial Stadium in South Carolina, in my opinion. And then number 3 is the mental aspect of this. The Cardinals have never beaten the Clemson Tigers as a member of the Atlantic Coast Conference. They've come close. They've come very close. But it has all resulted in losses, both home and away. We have a 10-year sample size, and the Cardinals have not won a single football game against Clemson. 2014, close but lost. 2015, close but lost. 2016, close but lost. 2021, really close. First and goal from the 4-yard line. You had 4 plays to get it in and win the game. You did not. You lost the game. Been very close, and I know that this is the first time that Braun will have coached against Clemson as the head coach of the Cardinals, and this is a brand new team as opposed to what it was in 2021 and 22, but it's still a narrative that we have to talk about. Louisville's beaten Miami since they've joined the conference, and it's not the end-all be-all, and it's not the main reason why Clemson's the toughest game, but when you combine them all, I believe that Clemson's the best team. It's a road game at night, and it's a team that you've never beaten as part of the ACC. Sure. All the ingredients necessary for the toughest game on the schedule. And again, this isn't really so much a reflection of my thoughts on Miami as much as it is my thoughts on Clemson. in the situation and the setting in which Louisville will be putting themselves into. So don't take this as me saying, well, here comes Dalton Pence slandering the Miami Hurricanes. Miami's a good team. Really good offense. Defense was pretty sketchy. I think Clemson has a better defense. And I think offense, the gap between Miami's offense and Clemson's offense is not as large of a gap between Clemson's defense and Miami's defense. Clemson has been averaging over 48 points per game the past 6 games. They're putting up points. It's not like they're winning these close games. No, they are blowing teams out. And it's to the point to where I respect everyone's opinions. I really do. But if your take on this right now is, well, Clemson, this is a game that Louisville's going to win because Clemson really hasn't played anybody, then it's one of those, okay, show me or tell me you haven't watched Clemson this year without telling me that you haven't watched Clemson this year. Because every time I've watched them, I've come away thoroughly impressed. They're a really good team. Really good quarterback play. Cade Klubnik is the best dual threat quarterback in the conference this year. And notice I said dual threat because Cam Ward is the best quarterback in the conference. But Klubnik is a pro-style QB. I'm sorry, Cam Ward is a pro-style QB. He doesn't run as much as people think. When he does, it's around the goal line and he scores. So it kind of skews that. But Klubnik is a true dual, don't combine those words, a true dual threat quarterback. And he's been really good on the ground, which has been an Achilles heel for the Louisville Cardinals. So it's the toughest game for me. It just is. The keys to victory for the Cardinals in this, number one, I think you have to clean up the mistakes, right? I mean, I don't think that, Boston College was a team that you were better than to the point to where you could afford to screw up here and there and ultimately be able to come back and win. Now, it wasn't easy. You were able to get it done, though, down 20-0. You can't beat yourselves and Clemson at the same time and ultimately win the game. It's not going to happen. Limit the turnovers. Limit the self-inflicted mistakes like penalties, inopportune sacks, short yardage execution and play calling, situational play calling, giving up big plays on defense, third down conversions on both sides of the football, and putting your defense in the best position to succeed. I think that that's all where it comes at. Limiting Cade Klubnik on the ground is also something that I think that Louisville needs to prioritize because Klubnik has been really good running the football. 227 yards on the ground on 41 carries. He's only been sacked 5 times. I think that a good portion of that goes to the offensive line. The other portion goes to his awareness when the pocket collapses and the ability to evade pressure and be able to extend plays and drives. It's been really good. He's been really effective at that. Louisville has not been really effective at spying other quarterbacks. So, case in point, you have to switch some things up. Linebackers are going to be a focal point for the Louisville defense. You have to limit what he's able to do on the ground because the Clemson rushing attack with Phil Maffa, already good enough. The Clemson passing attack with the young weapons at wide receiver and a really good veteran tight end in Jake Brenningstool, it's already good enough. You have to force Clemson into obvious third and long passing downs to where Louisville can afford to rush more than 3 to 4 guys and, bring some different blitzes and stunts and disguises and get into the backfield and just make it to where Clemson's offense is one-dimensional. Because if you let them run and pass effectively and efficiently, it's going to be a long day. It's going to be a long night, I should clarify. So limiting Cade Klubnik on the ground is the second key to victory for the Cardinals. The third, limit the empty drives. Does Louisville have a better chance at winning this game if it is a low-scoring or high-scoring game? Well, I am 100% undoubtedly going with the latter. Because Louisville's defense really hasn't been able to show that they can limit teams offensively. I'm I'm going back and looking at, what Louisville has done with the teams on their schedule. They gave up 31 to Notre Dame, 34 to SMU, 20 to Virginia, 52 to Miami, and 27 to Boston College. I think that Louisville has to score at least over 30 points in this game to beat Clemson, and that's going to come with maximizing your drives, putting pressure on Clemson to answer the response. It's the point where you pretty much are going to have to just get points in some capacity on your majority of drives. You can't have situations and quarters where you don't score. You're going to have to score in, you know, high points fashion to be able to win this game, because even if you do score, it's not a given. Clemson's offense has been really, really good, and they've looked really efficient. Cade Klubnik has looked really confident. And like I said, clean up your mistakes, limit Cade Klubnik on the ground, and limit the empty drives on offense. And I think you're going to put yourself into the best position that you can to succeed and possibly win this game. And that's all what it kind of comes down to. Looking across the ACC, we really haven't talked about it as much because of how Louisville's kind of fallen in the rankings. They're 3-2, which is, I think, sixth in the conference. There's 4 teams that are undefeated: Clemson, Miami, SMU, and Pittsburgh. SMU and Pittsburgh will play this weekend. Pittsburgh is 7-0. Some people have asked me, well, what are your thoughts on the Pittsburgh Panthers? And I've been very vocal that, credit is to be given. They are 7-0. They've won the 7 games in front of them, and that's all that you can ask for. And they are justifiably in that number 18 ranking, and I'm okay with them being ranked right where they are. That's completely okay. You could probably, you could probably insinuate that it could go. They could be higher than that. They could be closer to top 15 or maybe even top 10. But the focus here is who they've played. And that's where my issues with Pittsburgh arise. You remember national reporters last year? The national media wasn't sold on Louisville when they were 10-1 going into the Kentucky game. They lost to Pittsburgh. They beat Notre Dame. But they had so many close wins. The schedule really wasn't all that great. And people gave them credit for going 10-1, and they were ranked accordingly. But they weren't getting the national recognition as a true playoff contender. And I think that that's sort of the same situation that we're in here with Pittsburgh. Is, yes, there is an art to winning the games in front of you, and they deserve credit. But I don't think that they are going to end the year undefeated. I don't think that they're a playoff team, and I don't think that they're going to get to the ACC championship game. They do have Clemson and SMU also on the schedule remaining. They have Louisville on the schedule. But you look at who they played, and it's pretty uninspiring. I'm sorry, it is. Kent State. They beat Cincinnati by 1. West Virginia by 4. They beat Youngstown State. North Carolina by 10. California by 2. And then they beat Syracuse by 41-13 because Kyle McCord didn't know who he was supposed to be throwing to and threw 3 passes to Pittsburgh, who took it back each time for a touchdown, and then 2 more interceptions on top of that. So I don't want this to sound like, oh, well, Pittsburgh's bad. Pittsburgh's a good team, but they're not a playoff team, is where I'm trying to get at. And I think that when they play some really good competition, if Kevin Jennings, I'm not sure of his availability this week, if he's able to go against the Panthers, I think SMU beats Pittsburgh. I think Clemson beats Pittsburgh. And if they end the year 10-2 or 9-3, that's a good year for Pat Narduzzi's squad, considering what happened last year. So, again, don't take this as me saying Pittsburgh's a bad team and they're fraudulent and when they play good teams, they're automatically going to get beat. I think that they're going to put up a considerable amount of fight. They're a scrappy team with a really good offense. But I think that when it comes to the caliber of playoff discussion, that's where we start to kind of, go with the eye test, go with perception and just my intuition. And my intuition is telling me that Pittsburgh might be a good team, but they're going to have at least 2 losses at the end of the regular season, and that's still a good team, but they won't get into the playoff with 2 losses. So that is going to wrap up this week's edition of Around the ACC with DP. We'll be back next week discussing football, the Clemson game against Clemson. And also, basketball starts next Monday against Morehead State men's basketball, UCLA women's basketball in France. So a lot of stuff on the docket to talk about coming up next week. That's going to wrap up this week's edition of Around the ACC with DP. Be sure to tune in to Live with 55 coming up on Friday evening. But that's going to wrap up today's show. Everyone have a great day.